Society for a conversation with Foreign Policy's Andrew Solinger on STEM, space, and sustainability.
So, this is going to sound bougie, but I've interviewed presidents and prime ministers and CEOs on stage, and I always send the clip or the photo to my kids, and they're beyond, big deal. And then I told them I was going to be sitting down with Bill Nye. They're in their early 20s. And these are the quotes I got back on our family text. An icon for our generation. That is so friggin' sick. But then I think and it's like, come on, give me a real one. And they're like, well, it was always a good day in science class when the teacher put on a Bill Nye video.
Yeah.
So you are incredibly recognizable for not just your bow ties and colorful accoutrement, but also your role in educating and making science interesting, palatable, and enjoyable for not a generation, multiple generations, a lot of people in this room, and bringing wonder and excitement to science. And so, first of all, thank you for that.
Sure. Yes.
But tell us why that's important. Why is it, in addition to being fun, why is that an important mission for you and for us?
You make it fun so that people will watch or pay attention. That's an old trick, but I am of a certain age. I'm a mechanical engineer because I like airplanes and bicycles. I had a very influential physics teacher in high school, and I got into engineering school, and I got a job at Boeing and this and that. And I worked on 747s, and if you're ever on one, don't worry. I was very well supervised. Everything is fine. Clearly, the culture at Boeing has changed, and I mention it because the reason I wanted to do the Science Guy show and so on was because of these events here in the U.S. that I found really troubling. We created the Chevy Vega car and the Ford Pinto. I don't know if you guys are of a certain age.
Drove one.
And look, and he's fine. Not everybody who drove one was fine. They had a thing, this is notorious in the U.S., where when these cars got rear-ended, which happens to cars often enough, because they were human-driven instead of artificially intelligence-driven, they would explode. And you don't want that in a lot of cars. And then it was decided that at management at Ford Motor Company that it would be cheaper to pay lawsuits for killing people than it would be to rearrange the gas tank and exhaust pipe so they didn't cause fires. Then the U.S. abandoned teaching the metric system. This was in forward-thinking conservatives thought that there was no need for the U.S. people to learn the metric system. And I found this very troubling. So when I first got to Seattle, I got a job at Boeing. I didn't know anybody in Seattle. I just showed up. I was working my way. I was United Way Big Brother, and I volunteered at the Pacific Science Center, which is still there in Seattle. And I realized this myself, that young people are the future. I came up with that on my own. Check it out.
Eureka.
Yeah, eureka. And so I wanted to influence young people. So then when I had the opportunity to do this television show, we had very compelling research in the 1990s, back in the 20th century, that 10 years old is about as old as you can be to get the so-called lifelong passion for science. And it's probably as old as you can be to get the lifelong passion for anything. And so that's why we aimed the show at people 10 years old. But 10 years old turns out to be pretty good for a lot of people. By the time somebody's 10, first of all, everybody starts out you're 3 or 4 years old, you are thinking scientifically. You are trying to understand how the world works. You're continually coming up with your own explanations, hypotheses about why it rains, why there's thunder, what have you. And then by the time you're 10, generally you're able to reason. I say generally. There's a few people who can't, am I right? Able to reason as well as grown up, but the difference is your experience. And so that's why the show was made the way it was made, and it turned out to be successful.
Thank you for that. And so why aren't my sons scientists, since they were
we
such
don't want
big hits?
everybody to be a scientist. Okay, no. And we don't want everybody to be an engineer. I mean, the fashion consequences alone of that would be very troubling. No, you just want everybody to be scientifically literate, to have an appreciation for science in the same way you want everybody to have an appreciation for history and art and music. You want everybody to realize the value of science. And as I'm so fond of pointing out, of course, I'm from the United States. I don't know any better. English is my first language and all that stuff. But U.S. Constitution, Article 1, is about the legislative branch. We're going to have a Senate. We're going to have a House of Representatives. You get down there. We're going to meet so often. Each state's going to get 2 people. This and that. Section 4 is about elections will be held in a timely manner at a time chosen, if there's an R in the month, and so on. And then Section 8 is kind of the miscellany. We're going to have a way to deal with letters of marque. Pirates on the high seas. Yeah, I'm glad we got that one, yeah. And then Section 7 is about the post office. I'm of an age, you guys remember when people wanted to close the post office, thinking it was inefficient? It's in the Constitution. We're not closing the post office. Are you high? What the? Jesus. So then Section 8, Clause 8 of the U.S. Constitution. Congress is to promote the progress of science and useful arts. And it's in the friggin' Constitution, and it is sick.
That's got
No, I'm just quoting your
that's
people.
My son. That's got Ben Franklin's fingerprints all over it right after the post office mandate.
And this town is lousy with lightning rods, let me tell you, everywhere you look. So even though the word scientist had not been coined yet, the word science is in the Constitution. As the CEO of a nonprofit advancing space science and exploration so that citizens of Earth will know the cosmos and our place within it, I have been in many congressional offices, senatorial offices, where the senator, the member of Congress, and the staff is unfamiliar with Article 1, Section 8, Clause 8. If you go to the Patent and Trademark Office, that's their whole thing. They got candles and a choir with that thing. But many people are unfamiliar with that, and they realize, the guys who say whatever else you want about the guys who wrote the Constitution, they realize the value of science for our health, well-being, and for international competitiveness. And so this idea is old and worthy and wonderful. And as we say, we want science to be political. You got to decide how you're going to allocate your intellect and treasure, where you're going to spend money on, and then but you don't want it to be partisan. And you don't want people just to make stuff up.
And let's talk about that for a minute, and the role, the importance of just understanding how science works and the world works is in combating misinformation, which is a big problem that we have today.
My goodness, is it ever? So how do we do it? How do we combat it?
Yeah.
Well, guys, get it done. No, it's very difficult. So a couple things. If we could just get one thing across in every class, in every curriculum, every grade level, everywhere, it would be what's nowadays called critical thinking. When I was in school, it might have been called logical reasoning or something like that. But the idea, critical thinking is a fine phrase. It just means, we want it to mean the habit of mind of evaluating evidence. It doesn't mean you question everything to the point where you just have what my family would call the whammy diddles, where you can't get anything done. But you do want to be able. When I have met people in both red states and blue states who have either asked me, as we say in middle school, to my face, or have asked somebody to ask me, does Bill think the world is flat? These are people that went to high school in the United States, think the world might be flat. Dude. NASA, there's a T-shirt you can get that it's a picture of Earth with the NASA logo. It's round, we checked, is pretty nice. But just that anybody would think that is really troubling. And then you were talking earlier in the, I guess the green room, which was kind of a pale white.
Figured it.
I guess white is pale, buff. We were talking about COVID and vaccines. You guys, vaccines are 200 years old, at least. Formal vaccines are 200 years old, at least. Wow. I went to elementary school with a guy who had polio. Peoples, you do not want polio. You just do not, come on. So anyway, back to you.
Let's go back to the. Thank you for that. Let's go back to your new gig on the planet. Why is thinking about climate from space important and relevant?
Yes. So what's extraordinary, everybody, is, when I was a kid, we were all fascinated with the Cold War, and we were fascinated with the idea that you could have a camera on a spacecraft. Then the mythic thing was to photograph pigeons in Red Square in Moscow. Turns out, yeah, you can do that because people can build cameras that are of such extraordinary optical quality, and it have found ways to compensate for the speed of these vehicles, these spacecraft. And now we have these instruments that can measure the depth of the ocean to within a centimeter. In so-called real time. You can measure now populations of plankton in the open ocean by evaluating the pigments, the light that reflects off the pigments, the color of these plankton. And you can then monitor the progress of glaciers, the receding glaciers. You can watch storms move around. I remember as a kid, Hurricane Agnes came through, and there was this whole thing about, is it going to go through Washington, D.C.? Is it going to go through Delaware? Is it going to get to Philadelphia? On and on and on. And now everybody in the developed world has heard the expression, the spaghetti plot, the path of the hurricane by different computer models.
We've got one right now, and in fact, it has impacted us here in New York. Yeah. We have one of our partners was meant to come to this afternoon's food forum, and 2 days ago, they're based in Tampa. It's Mosaic. It's a fertilizer company, and 2 days ago, we're out. You know, the airport's going to close. We have to stay here with our operations, and that hurricane is indeed heading a little bit further west. But you're quite right. We can track that very clearly now.
When I was a kid, if it was within plus or minus 50 nautical miles, it was like, woo, wow. Now, you guys, we start complaining if it's off 10 minutes. You know, it's just amazing. You can't. I mean, people can't tell which side of the street they're standing on without looking at their phones, and that's because. No, because of the extraordinary accuracy. So we think of outer space as a long way away.
Yeah.
But when you're in so-called low Earth or medium Earth orbit, the instruments that we've developed enable us to monitor Earth's environment with extraordinary tables of data.
Let's do a speed round. We have a couple of minutes left. So 1 minute on you brought up that, like I said, that clock's broken. Don't worry about it. So there's you mentioned phones. I'd be interested in your incredible to have a computer in your hands.
Yes.
It does so much. We were noodling around with that earlier in the white room or green room, whatever we call it. But it has created also a lot of pain and agony and angst.
And I'd like to young people.
Yeah, among the young people. I'd like to know your view on that. You know, should those phones be stripped of the youth? We're starting to see some controls coming in on social media, which are unenforceable, in my opinion.
Yes, well, you seem to have answered the question, but you know, I just take heart that Socrates complained about the youth of today. and they're disrespectful and so on. And then you hear these mythic stories of when paperback novels were introduced. The world was going to end because these kids are going to be reading novels all day. And so what we need to do is get people to look up from their phones. I'll give you that. But I think it's just there'll be a time when we all get over it. Like, do you remember, you'd be in the bathtub and the phone would ring and you'd get up to answer the phone because it was just it could be some sort of important. So pretty soon we'll get used to not looking at them. That's my prediction.
Okay.
But as far as young people goes, I can get where in the same way you tell a kid, you got to turn out the light and go to sleep. You'll be shocked to learn, they wanted me to stop playing chess. I was playing chess at 8 at night. You got to stop. You got to.
You were young.
Yes. No, it wasn't last week. Yeah, it was some time ago. And so I claim it's analogous. But to your point, the phones have so much information and are so valuable to one's everyday, conducting one's business every day, that maybe it is the scale of the thing that we need to address.
Right.
But I've made jokes about how you can turn the phone off. What? Yes. And the world's still spinning. I had no idea. Yeah.
Let's talk about to finish off, let's talk about the world still spinning. You have a great message to remind us of that the Earth will be here long after we are gone.
That is a true fact, not a false fact. You guys, this whole idea we got to save the Earth, which is quite reasonable, but you have to save the Earth for me, for us. Earth's going to be here. The rats are going to be running the show. Insects will come back after we're gone. So what we want to do is preserve the world for humankind. And my message is, it's big picture, but I stand by it. We as humans are now in charge of the planet. When I was a kid, you would think of nature as separate. You'd go camping. When I first moved out to the Pacific Northwest, it was cool to go climbing, mountaineering. You'd think of that as separate from you. But now, because there's so many of us using so much energy, that we have to think of it as we're in charge of the Earth. The same way if you've ever owned a house, or if you've lived in an apartment, you have to maintain it. You have to control the heat, the air conditioning, the water. You don't leave the water running. You don't waste hot water. You don't want to run. And so we have to think of the Earth in that big picture way. And you made a hilarious comedy, ironic joke about how we all worked together during COVID, which we didn't, just, some disclosure. But there'll be a couple times when we're really going to have to do that and work together. And there'll be another pandemic, I presume. There'll be these wars that are going on might engage more and more of us. But the other thing, are you down with Apophis? You hip to Apophis?
Hip us to Apophis.
Yeah, so everybody's going to be talking about it. Oh, my goodness. No kidding, Friday the 13th, Friday the 13th, 2029, an asteroid, which we're calling Apophis, will come between us and the geosynchronous, the Sirius XM satellites. And it will remind us, by the way, Apophis, by one translation, is the god of anxiety. I think that's cool. Anyway, it's going to come whizzing by, except it's in space. There's no sound. It'll just be. And everybody's going to be talking about it. And so we at the Planetary Society are hopeful that we can organize what we're calling a dress rehearsal for deflecting an asteroid. And this is a real problem, that there's no way to do it without engaging everybody in the world. And you get into a thing, people were talking about nuclear power before we came out here. A recent test was, people had presumed, okay, first of all, when you go, you don't want the asteroid to hit Earth, because that would be catastrophic. It would be, on a Windows machine, it's Control-Alt-Delete for humankind. On Apple, I guess it's wipe. Yeah, anyway, that would be bad. And you don't, in general, it was believed you don't want to send Bruce Willis to blow it up because you don't know. Right now, it's not clear if it's a solid object or what people call a rubble pile. These small objects held together very loosely by their very gentle mutual gravity. And so you'd end up with buckshot instead of a bullet kind of problem. But just recently, it was realized that you might be able to zap this thing with X-rays, which you'd get from a nuclear weapon. So if somebody wants to send a nuclear explosive into outer space on a rocket, you're going to have to take a meeting. Like, we'll take our word for it. We're shooting nuclear. It's for the asteroid. Yeah, sure. Stuff could easily go wrong.
Sounds like the next season of Three Body Problem.
So, you guys, the Three Body Problem, I'm all for it. A satellite, if you have the Earth, the Moon, and a satellite, that's the Three Body Problem.
Yeah.
Okay? It doesn't mean there's a TV series.
So to bring it on home, Apophis, we've learned a new term to be worried about. I worship the god of Apophis, and I didn't even know it. And so something to worry about. But it is important that we treat our home like our home.
Yes,
and maintain it.
And so before we go, about nuclear power. I don't know if you guys, I visited a nuclear power plant. It's fabulous. It's cool. We have 430 or so commercial around the world. I claim if somebody had a long-term plan, 5, 6, 10 years, to get a Confederate in the nuclear power plant, that person could smuggle out some material. And it's manageable, 400 of them. But when there are 40,000 of them, just keep that in mind. Just like security is a real issue with that. Seems like a panacea thing. Thank you all. Thank you.
Bill Nye.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you.
Bill.